this is the first video, the first lecture of a 14-part lecture series that I am presenting to you about the history of East Asian medicine. We're going to be looking at some of the theories, the history, the philosophies, and the concepts which underlie various aspects of what can generally be called East Asian medicine, or also acupuncture and herbal medicine, and the various modalities that go into that under that umbrella term. And the purpose of this course is to give students a little bit of a broader context of the historical roots and the origins of many of the ideas which underlie this medicine. And we're going to be digging into that. It's a very vast history. It's a pretty long lecture series. And I'm very excited to be presenting it to you. I've been working hard on it. So here we are. If you're joining me, you may just be finding this video on the internet, in which case, welcome. You may also be a student of the Wan Institute, which is a graduate school for acupuncture and herbal medicine training in the United States. And so if you're in my Wan Institute course, welcome to the course. And there will be some other resources for you, but these are also videos that are going to be shared on the internet as well. So kind of has a two-part purpose to the videos. On one hand, this is for us and our course, and on the other hand, these are also videos that I plan to share with the general public, just for educational purposes. So I have presented a little I've prepared a little presentation today for our first lecture, our first week of the course. And let's just jump into it. We're going to have a lecture for each lesson like this. A nice PowerPoint presentation that I've prepared for you all. So let's jump into it. Our first lesson is called Socio-Realities, Orthodoxy, and Syncretic Pluralism. Wow, what does that mean? Those are some words. Well, we're going to find out. But just to start off, this is kind of like the intro lecture, okay? So I just want to explain to you kind of what this course is all about, because I feel like it's a little bit of a different course than the normal courses that maybe one takes when they're in school for East Asian medicine. And that was kind of the purpose of why I made it, because, well, I'll get into that. So the purpose of this course is to understand the evolution and the ideas and concepts which we use daily in the practice of East Asian medicine. That's like acupuncture, moxibustion, herbal medicine, various styles of these things, various ways of approaching it, and also more concepts as well, which we're going to delve into. We're going to learn the history of these ideas and these concepts and their origins. A big part of this is I want to help us discover some of the sources of these things. So that includes texts and books, important people and figures like important doctors throughout the ages who had revolutionary ideas and influential ideas. And I want to also look at maybe some events that were happening throughout the history, throughout the time periods when these ideas emerged. And maybe we might learn that some of these, more worldly events actually shaped some of these ideas. We're going to try to uncover some of the ideological forces which shaped the medicine and the tradition and the reality of the people who created these ideas, which is fundamentally a different reality than our own, which is important to understand that, we live in in our contemporary time period with a whole different set of ideas, and our reality on a daily basis is fundamentally removed from the culture and the socio-political situation that the people who developed these ideas were immersed in. So it's important to kind of investigate, be curious about like what was life like for them, because this was in many ways a different world. And I think actually by doing that, it broadens our reality, it broadens our views, and we gain insights into the ideas themselves by being able to, even if just by in a small way, step into those people's shoes or try to a little bit. So we want to explore and create a map. This course is like a map for a lifetime of future self-directed learning of East Asian medicine. And it's my hope that it deepens our understanding of East Asian medicine and the fundamental concepts. For example, some of the ideas that we're going to explore: acupuncture, the 5 elements or the 5 phases, yin and yang, qi, meridians, herbal medicine, herbal formulas, the term TCM, things like Yang Sheng, or which is like the school of nourishing life, ideas such as possession, which is something that shows up in 5 element acupuncture, and many other ideas. There's so many ideas, and we're going to try to just cover in a very broad brushstroke way many of these ideas, where they came from, where they originated from, and by who. So, like, who thought of this stuff? You know, we use it every day, but we don't even really always think about where it came from and its origins. So, you know, what are the philosophies that underlie these ideas? Because they weren't invented by a 21st century person. They were created by people from a very far removed place and time with a very far removed way of seeing the world, which is still relevant, by the way. So, some of our goals, we want to uncover some of the main sources of these things. Like I said, texts, schools of thought, important individuals. We want to inspire you as students, or even just as non-students, even if you're just somebody interested in East Asian medicine. I want to inspire everybody to become a self-directed learner in a way. Maybe inspire you to become a scholar physician, which is sort of like, hey, it's a moral imperative to be constantly learning more about our tradition and about the medicine. I want to introduce you to some of the systems of thought and some of the foundational concepts that underlie it. And I would love if we gain a beginner's understanding of some of the East Asian philosophical traditions, because I feel like those things, those philosophies, are the bedrock of a lot of East Asian medicine ideas. So by taking this course, we are shooting our roots down deep into the rich soil of our medical tradition, as far down deep as I can, as a as a flawed human teaching a course that on a topic that is over 2,000 years old. So we're gonna just do our best. And I'd just like to say, the goal is not for you to take the course and immediately it's like, hey, I'm an expert about all this stuff. I have learned in depth, deeply, every single idea about East Asian medicine because I took this course. No, that's not the purpose. We're not trying to become experts at each individual idea. We're just trying to understand maybe some of the origins, maybe where did the ideas come from, maybe even find that this is an idea, and then later in our journey, maybe we can return to it and learn it in depth on our own. So that's why I say think of this course as a map. East Asian medicine, acupuncture, herbal medicine, it's been around for over 2,000 years. People have been thinking about this stuff for over 2,000 years. And we're going to cover a lot of territory. The goal isn't to learn everything. It's really a sprawling, complex history of ideas. And rather, my hope is that we provide a broader context. That's why I think of it like a map. We're going to lay it all out, as much of it as we can. And then as you go through your life, as you go through your own individual practice, maybe after you get out of school, you might decide, hey, I want to learn more about one of these ideas. Maybe I want to learn more about taking the pulse. And you'll know because of this course that, oh, I can look at this ancient book and I can look at this ancient book. And those are important books about the pulse. Or maybe I want to learn more about specific, where do these herbal formulas come from? Well, I'll know that this school of herbal medicine came from, this scholar, this doctor, and I can maybe look at his book or their book. So it's a map. It's a sprawling history. It's a variety of times, places, ways of thinking, and it's going to set you up for a lifetime of self-directed learning. That's really my biggest goal here. So this is kind of like the broad overview of the course. So let's just like lay it all out, right? This is where we're going to be journeying together over the next 14 lessons. So this is our first lesson. It's like an introduction. We're going to just go over some like foundational concepts to just orient ourselves. And then lesson 2 and 3. So we're going to be looking at, in the green here, these first 2 dynasties of China. It's the Shang dynasty and the Zhou dynasty. So the Shang dynasty is like the most ancient recorded dynasty of China. We really don't even know much about it, but we have some archaeological evidence, and it helps us to understand some of the very deepest, most ancient roots of Chinese history. We're going to look at and try to understand, how did people view medicine in the Shang dynasty? How did people view reality in the Shang dynasty? And maybe some of those ideas are still resonant in the medicine. We're also going to then look at the Zhou dynasty, which is an important dynasty in Chinese history and Chinese medicine history, because this is really like the first major imprint of history, of culture, of what we come to understand as Chinese culture, Chinese medicine, Chinese history. That's an important dynasty, and it's an important historical time period. We're going to look at important medical ideas of the Zhou dynasty and how maybe what was going on during that time period, which was probably a pretty intense time to be alive. A lot of strife, a lot of war, a lot of conflicts. How did that maybe influence the people who were thinking things at that time? And actually, the things that were going on in that time period gave rise to perhaps some of the most important ideas to ever come out of Chinese philosophy in general, such as the major philosophical schools. We're going to learn about that, how that all goes down. And that's what we're going to learn about in lesson 4. That's right around this time period. Right between the Zhou dynasty and the Han dynasty, there's a period called the Warring States period. That's when all of the most important philosophical ideas that really set the tone for Chinese philosophy and Chinese culture and Chinese medicine and history, that's where they all arise from, during this very, very fertile period of thinking called the Warring States period. It's also termed the 100 Schools of Thought, because there were all these competing philosophies at that time, and that's where you get things like Taoism, Confucianism, other lesser known philosophies like legalism or Moism. We're not going to go super in depth into each of those because that's a little bit too far out of the scope of the course, but we will, over the period of our course, be looking at Confucianism and Taoism, and also Buddhism, which comes later. That's sort of connected with, at this point, the first time that China ever becomes unified with the Qin dynasty. It's an important period of time because that becomes a pretty central element of the worldview of China. It's like it's an empire. It's been unified. We're going to look at the types of medical situations that were going on during these periods. And then we're going to look at Confucianism, which is probably one of the most influential and important philosophies throughout the world, really, because it's been influential on so many people. One of the most influential philosophies of all time, Confucius. We're going to look at a little bit about Confucius, some Confucian philosophers, some of the main ideas about Confucianism, because they have a great relevance to East Asian medicine. These ideas resonate in ways that we may not be aware of all throughout the medical ideas of acupuncture, herbal medicine, all of these things. They are everywhere, and if we don't know about Confucianism at all, we may not be able to realize that. We may not see that, oh, this is actually kind of like a Confucian way of looking at things. We might not be aware of that. And so it's good to be aware of that, because we may be doing things in our daily lives as an acupuncturist, which is really kind of like a Confucian way of doing things, and we may not even be aware of it. And that's a tragedy. We should know about that. We should be aware of it, even if we don't identify as a Confucian, which I don't necessarily identify as a Confucian or a Taoist or really this or that or anything. It's important to know the origins of these ideas and where they came from and what influenced and inspired them. And maybe we do find something that resonates with us within it. I think it's an important philosophy to learn about. This whole blue time period here on the chart is a very important time period of East Asian medicine. This is where some of the most important foundational ideas and books and philosophies and theories emerge from. So this is just a really very important time period to learn about, because then we're going to learn about the Han Dynasty, which is really kind of where it all happened at this time period. It's like that's where all of those philosophies and ideas really came to fruition, and that's just an extremely important time period for East Asian medicine. Some of the most important books were written at that time period, which we're going to learn about. These are books which, this is 500 AD, 600 AD, or no, 200 AD. 2,000 years later, these books are influencing our medicine. We are looking back at these books as the source, the root of many of our ideas. Books like the Nanjing, the Classical Difficulties, books like the Shanghan Lun. That's like the most important herbal medicine book of all time. So it's very, very important that we learn about this period of time. And that's what we're going to do during those first handful of lessons. Then we're going to move down into here. I'd say the middle part is maybe a little bit less important as it comes to East Asian medicine. So we're just going to spend a couple lessons here in the middle period around the Tang Dynasty. And that's where we're going to be learning more about Taoism. Taoism comes, it's developed earlier, but I think it's a good time to learn about it at this period because it kind of becomes a more important philosophy during the Tang Dynasty. We're going to look at how Taoism and some of the things that happen in the Tang Dynasty influence East Asian medicine. Then we're going to also look at Buddhism, which is an important philosophy and religion which happens around the same time. It starts to spread everywhere in China. So we're going to spend quite a bit of time learning about Buddhism, and we happen to, if you're at the Wan Institute, it's a graduate college that is run by a Buddhist group of individuals. So it's a relevant thing to learn about. It's good to know the important concepts of Buddhism and how that influences the medicine, along with Taoism, along with Confucianism. Then after those two lessons, we're going to jump down into the Songjin Yuan dynasties of China. Now this is, once again, I would say maybe second to this blue stuff up here. This is probably the second most important period of East Asian medicine development. And we're going to learn why. We're going to learn what happened there. We're going to learn about the Song Dynasty. We're going to learn about this thing called Neo-Confucianism. And then we're going to learn about how all of the things that were going on in this period probably influenced the most radical advancements in herbal medicine, which happened during this period. There were crazy, influential advancements in herbal medicine, and those are still influencing herbalists to this day. Then we're going to take a look at the Ming and the Qing dynasties, which are down here. And there were also important things that happened during that period, but I would say probably lesser so than the Songjin Yuan. But still, we want to know about what happened. And there are some important things like the theory of worm disease, which is developed during this point in time. And then very importantly to our contemporary situation, we're going to learn about, hey, what happened during this last period, this most recent period of Chinese history, which is the Republic of China, and then the founding of the People's Republic of China, which is the current political, governmental situation in China, and how that influenced Chinese medicine and East Asian medicine as a whole, which it had a profound impact on the current way that East Asian medicine is practiced, how it's thought about. It was an extremely highly influential period of time, and I would say, even though this is such a shorter period of time than maybe these other periods that we're looking at, because of our closeness to it as a contemporary practice, people practicing the medicine in contemporary time, it has a profound impact on our experience of East Asian medicine. So we're going to look at that. And that's super important. That's where TCM comes from. That's where the modern term TCM, traditional Chinese medicine, which did not exist before this period, that's where it comes from. So we're going to learn a little bit about that. That's super duper important. Then we don't want to, I don't want to make this all about China, but the fact is, a lot of East Asian medicine comes from China in a way, although that's not to take away from the other East Asian medicine cultures and theories and practices. And so it's important that we look at some of the other very influential ways of approaching East Asian medicine. And we're going to do that in lesson 13, where we look at maybe some influences from Japan, because there's a lot of very important Japanese influences, Korean influences, and other influences from East Asian medicine in general. We want to take a look at some of these other areas where there was a profound impact on styles, theories, things like that. And then to round off our entire lecture series, our semester, we're going to look at kind of where we are right now in the world, which is the engagement and the sort of tension but integration that's happening between Western biomedicine and the Western sciences and the Western world and East Asian medicine. So, I actually think we live in one of the most exciting periods of this whole thing. After this whole 2,000 years of very exciting developments, we live in one of the most exciting periods of time, because the two of the biggest, most revolutionary ways of approaching medicine have sort of like collided. Western medicine and science, and East Asian medicine and the Chinese medicine influences have sort of collided, like two planets smashing into each other. And we are experiencing sort of like a somewhat of a renaissance moment where they're influencing each other, and a lot of new things that have not happened are coming out of it. There's a lot of chaos, but there's a lot of creativity. So I get really excited about that stuff. I think it's so cool that we get to live during a period of such profound ideas. So we're going to take a look at that in our last lesson. That's kind of the broad overview. It's a lot of stuff, okay? But I just want to let you know that if you're taking the course, don't feel overwhelmed. My goal is not to overwhelm you, but there's a lot of stuff. It's like 2,000 years of history. That being said, like I said earlier, I don't expect you to become a master at any of these things. It's really just a map. I want to give you a broad overview, so this way you can go back and study whatever you find interesting, and you're not going to be graded in the sense of like, hey, has this person mastered this period of time? It's like, no, you just need to be able to pick out the most important things that happened, some of the important developments, some of the important people and books and texts, and just be able to know what those are. Well, I'm not going to put in trick questions for you. I'm not going to like try to make you master something. It's really just about like curiosity, exploration, and I hope that the course, I'm trying to develop the course in such a way that it's very robust and there's a lot of information, but at the end of the day, it's not supposed to be it's not supposed to be an impossible course. It's actually should be pretty easy, okay? So I'm trying to make it as simple as possible, as simple and straightforward as possible, while keeping as much depth. So we have a text that we're using if you're taking the course. It's this text by Paul Unshold. It's called Medicine in China, History of Ideas. This is one of my favorite books. And my book is so marked up at this point, but it's such a good book. It's a little bit like, it can be a little bit of a challenging book. It's like, it's philosophy meets history meets East Asian medicine. But this is probably one of the coolest books that will give you a really rounded understanding of the history of our medicine. And so, what's the intent of our primary text according to the text itself? It wants to explore the conditions that accompanied the rise of new systems of therapy and the continued existence of old ones, and to elucidate the causes and the extent of changes that occurred over the course of time within the individual conceptual systems. So, Paul Unshold, he's a really great scholar of East Asian medicine and philosophy, and he has some of the best translations of some of the most important texts, such as the Neijing, like the Neijing Su Wen, the Neijing Ling Shu. He translated the Nanjing. He's got some like really super duper awesome translations, and so yeah, he's like one of the most highly regarded scholars in the field, and so this is a awesome book. It's a slight bit dated because it came out, I think, in like the late 80s, early 90s, and there's been probably 20, 25, 30 years of history that's gone on in our contemporary time since then. So it's, this book takes us pretty much up to like maybe like lesson 12, somewhere around there. And then we're going to do a little bit more contemporary exploration on our own with the biomed stuff. But this text will take us pretty much all the way up through to the People's Republic of China and the founding of TCM and all that important stuff. So let's look at some of the ideas from the book, from the first chapter of the book. So here's a quote from George Orwell. He says, "Orthodoxy means not thinking, not needing to think. Orthodoxy is unconscious." And we want to push against orthodoxy. We want to have an open mind and think about all these different ideas. We don't want to get stuck in a certain way of thinking. We want to be able to think about all the different ways of thinking and kind of weigh them for what they're worth. So Chinese medicine differs from European science in that it appears to be based on what one might call patterned knowledge. Various patterns of knowledge, sometimes overlapping, sometimes antagonistic and mutually exclusive, exist side by side in the literature and probably in the minds of the people. That's what Paul Unshold says in the Nanjing, his Nanjing translation. And so that can be difficult for people because, we just want, it's like, hey, how do things work? What's the truth? What is just tell me how to think about this, dude. And the reality is, in our field, that's not really possible completely. There are many different ways of thinking about things in East Asian medicine, and they all exist simultaneously. Some of them don't agree with each other, and yet they still exist. They continue to exist throughout time. So we have to become comfortable with the fact that there are different, antagonistic, maybe sometimes disagreeing ways of thinking about things. And it's kind of like, it's a pattern. There's different patterns. It's like a quilt, and there's different pieces of it, and it's all kind of sewn together. It's not always going to be 100% coherent or in agreement with each other because these are ideas which come from different periods of time, different ways of seeing reality, different worldviews. And so that's what we're exploring, some of the origins of this. So here's another term, pluralism. And so pluralism is the condition of being multiple or plural, a condition in which numerous distinct ethnic, religious, and cultural groups are present and tolerated within a society, and the belief that such a condition is desirable or socially beneficial. So evidence reveals a diversity of concepts extending for more than 2,000 years. New ideas were developed, were introduced from outside and adopted by authors of medical texts, while at the same time older views continued to have their practitioners and clients. So this is a theme for East Asian medicine that we have to learn, is that it's pretty pluralistic. Some people don't like pluralism. Some people just want to have, like I said, the orthodox view. It's like, what is the truth? Well, that's not how it is in East Asian medicine, for better or for worse. It's just the reality. There's a lot of pluralistic views, and they're all kind of intermingled, jumbled up together, and we need to be able to understand where all these things come from, where they differ, where they agree, how to put them together. Here's an example. I tried to make a little visual kind of example for that, of the pluralism and the different traditions and thought systems that somebody might encounter when talking about East Asian medicine. So we've got so many things. So we've got this big bubble. This is like TCM, This is what we're learning in school, all these TCM concepts that just happen to have been created and formalized just 100 years, less than 100 years ago. We've got ideas, classic ideas from the Neijing, Suwen, and the Ling Shu. There's practices like cupping and gua sha. There's ideas coming from ancient books like the I Ching. There's Confucian ideas and Neo-Confucian ideas. There's acupuncture and there's moxibustion. There's ideas from the Nanjing. There's ideas from more modern people like Master Deng. So, people consider massage and tuina part of East Asian medicine. That's an important branch as well. And then there's Wu Xing. There's the five elements. And then there's the Worsley five elements, which, this is a guy that just existed in the past 100 years. He came up with his whole system of thinking about East Asian medicine. That's another way that we can approach it. And that's totally different from TCM. Then we've got herbal medicine traditions. Herbal medicine is its own branch, and there's like many, many different traditions of herbal medicine. There's Wen Ming, which is like worm disease. There's Shang Han Lun, which is all about cold damage. This book was developed over 1,000 years ago. Then there's Qigong and there's Tai Chi and movement practices, meditative practices with influences from Taoism, Buddhism. There's influences from Japan and Korea, such as Japanese Kampo medicine or Korean Sa'am acupuncture. There's a whole pluralistic panoply of ideas which we have the opportunity to engage with. We can learn about them if we want to. We can choose one of these and really hone in on it, or we can be an explorer and like learn about all different ones. We can combine them. Speaking of combining them, that's what this next part is about. It's called syncretism. So syncretism is the reconciliation or fusion of differing systems of belief, such as in philosophy or religion, especially when success is partial or the result is heterogeneous. It's the merging of two or more originally different inflectional forms. So what happens when different traditions become blended into one? What happens when different schools of thought influence one another or merge? So syncretism refers to the process whereby two or more independent cultural systems or elements conjoin to form a new and distinct system. It's an important part of the evolution of individual, cultural, religious, or philosophical systems of thought. And that's what's happening in our medicine. There's all of these distinct ideas that come from different time periods, different realities, different worldviews, philosophies, political situations, governmental situations, economic situations that influence the way they see the world. And then when they get to us, they're all jumbled together, and we have the opportunity as a practitioner to find out how to best blend this to our purposes. We have all these different tools. They don't all do the same thing. They all do different things. And they're all maybe meant for different things. And we need to, it's our job to learn about how each one of them work, where they come from, what they do, what they are. You don't use a wrench to hammer a nail. You don't use a hammer to unscrew a bolt. So all these different tools have purposes, and we need to learn about them so that we can combine them and use them and come up with new ideas, come up with revolutionary new ideas in our own practice. And learning about these things helps us to have the context to do that. So here's an example of how syncretism happens for me as a personal practitioner of East Asian medicine, as an acupuncturist and an herbalist, So this is kind of like my current syncretistic practice of East Asian medicine. I take influences from Worsley Five Element. The Wan Institute has a lot of Worsley Five Element influences. I take influences from Master Deng. The acupuncturist that I work with has taught me all sorts of cool things ever since we became buddies. He's taught me all sorts of great Master Deng things, and I've really just I love Master Deng, so that's influenced me. There's theories, there's meridian theories and point studies, like the Japanese Shudo Denmai. He's a really cool author. And there's theories about the meridians and the points, and so we can study that, and that can influence our practice. There's just my personal accumulated clinical experiences that don't even have a formal place, but they influence the way I practice. There's herbal medicine training, studying the Shanghan, studying the various herbal medicine schools of thought from my time at the Wan Institute in the herbal program and beyond. Then there's all the Western medicine research that I've done. I read a lot of science papers and I study a lot of Western medicine topics. And even though that's not necessarily part of East Asian medicine, I think in the contemporary world, it sort of is. Like it's all getting blended together. We have the opportunity to be very syncretistic and very practice in an integrative way. And so a lot of that stuff does influence me. It changes how I think about some of the ideas on a certain level, whether it's conscious or not. Some of it you can't help. I mean, we don't even, if like I speak English, not Chinese, so some of it you can't help but be influenced by the things of the contemporary world. Then there's studying the classics. I come from a philosophy background. My major was philosophy before I got into acupuncture. So, for me, studying Taoism, studying Confucianism, that has an influence on the way that I interpret the medicine, which is why I think this is such a cool course, because it's like we get to like look at that a little bit, like and peer under the surface of how that happens. We're studying the classics of the medicine, even like the Neijing and the Nanjing and the Shanghan. Then we have other things like studying cupping, massage, gua sha, moxibustion. That all plays a role in my practice. These are all things that I use on like a daily basis. All this stuff is mishmashed into each other. There's even more than that too, because like I really think Campo's really cool. There's like a whole bunch of cool things that we can learn about, and different styles and different techniques that we can get takeaways from. And so this is called kind of like eclectic syncretism. Okay, it's like very eclectic. Eclectic and syncretic healthcare behaviors are mainly goal oriented. They're not cognition based. So that means like we're combining things and we're trying to find the best way to reach our goal, which is how do we treat this patient? How do we make their issue better? How do we give them the best acupuncture or herbal medicine or treatment of whatever kind? How do we make the problem resolved? And sometimes that requires us to find creative solutions. And syncretism is a big part of finding creative solutions in East Asian medicine. We're finding new ways to improve our treatment outcomes. It's a very pragmatic approach. It's practical. So in our book, Paul Unshold kind of has this theory about the structure of medical systems, which is part of what we're exploring as we go through the history. And he says, I have found it useful to differentiate between two qualitatively different conceptual dimensions of the structure of medical systems. He says that one of them is there is this durable paradigm under any medical system at its core. And then there is more of like the outer level, it's like a flexible coating, and the coating changes. The paradigm remains pretty solid and stable, but over time, as people's worldviews change, the coating changes. And so we have different takes on the paradigm. And what is a paradigm? A paradigm is something that serves as a pattern or a model. It's a set of assumptions, concepts, values, and practices that constitutes a way of viewing reality for the community that shares them, especially in an intellectual discipline. So in the history of medicine in China, two basic paradigms appear to have provided the entirety of all therapy systems documented with a durable core. These are the two durable paradigms according to Paul Unshold. There are cause and effect relations between corresponding phenomenon. And this is where we get things like magical correspondences, like kind of homeopathic correspondences, such as like, walnuts look like a brain, so they're good for the brain and the kidneys. Then we have more systematic correspondences, and this is really kind of in a lot of ways, the heart of a lot of East Asian medicine. It's the systematic correspondences of the medicine. So we systematize everything according to things like yin and yang. This herb is more of a yin herb versus this herb is more of a yang herb. We categorize things according to five phase theory. This acupuncture point is a fire point. This acupuncture point is a water point. Or this herb resonates with the fire element. This herb resonates with the water element. So if you look throughout the medicine, that's everywhere. That's like the heart of the medicine. That's a big part of the paradigm. And then there are also other things. There's other aspects of the medicine which are not always, at the forefront, but are nonetheless a big part of it. There's cause and effect relationships between non-corresponding phenomenon. That's the other part. And that's like humans and supernatural forces, spiritual things. There's a lot of shamanistic ideas in Chinese and East Asian medicine, and demonological ideas. And then there's the relationship between humans and the natural forces of the world. And so, if you look on page 7 of our text, he has a very comprehensive list of paradigms and sub paradigms, and we can kind of explore that. That's just part of our reading this for this lesson. But that's important, and this will, lead us into the main parts of the book later on about systematic correspondence. So, the soft coding is, we can think about this as like the adaptations that these paradigms go through and the sub paradigms go through throughout time because of the different socio-realities through which they existed. That's what constitutes the soft coding. So this is how we view reality. We live in our own peculiar socio-reality right now. Maybe we don't all live in the same socio-reality. Maybe we have a different socio-reality. But those are like the lenses that color our reality, and they change over time depending on what's happening in history, depending on what's happening in the world, how we view things. Somebody living in the Shang dynasty of China viewed the world through a completely different paradigm and sub-paradigm than we view the world right now. We have a totally different experience, and that flavors the ideas that come to us from those periods of time. So East Asian medicine in 2024 versus East Asian medicine in the Han dynasty of China, it's kind of a different thing. So such adaptation supplies the durable paradigmatic core with what I call the soft coding of therapeutic knowledge. Soft because it's flexible and subject to frequent modification. So for example, we can think of the question, what causes people to get sick? Well, throughout time, throughout the evolution of ideas, this has had different answers, depending on the socio-reality of the person answering that question. So maybe in the Shang dynasty, they might say, well, what gets you sick is your ancestors. And then maybe in the Zhou dynasty, they might say, no, it's spirits, it's demons. Maybe in the Han dynasty, they might say, no, that's what gets you sick is wind, it's qi. And then as maybe 1,000 years later, in a more modern contemporary time, they say, no, that's all wrong. It's actually bacteria and viruses that get you sick. And then maybe other people might disagree. They might say, actually, it's has to do more with your innate and adaptive immune system. There's a lot of different conflicting theories about the immune system. Even in Western scientific medicine, people don't agree. There's terrain theory versus the competing theories. There's some people say it's bacteria and viruses. Some people say it's the state of your immune system. That's the more important factor in how you get sick or how you remain healthy. So the point is, all of these things are socio-realities. The reason that people have these beliefs and ideas is often dependent on the way that they see reality and the world. So I think it's useful personally to have an understanding of all of these different socio-realities, at least on a basic level, because then, sometimes where one socio-reality and one paradigm of thinking might not achieve the goal that you're looking for, you can then try a different one. Because our main goal, like I said earlier, is a pragmatic one. We want to fix people's problems, as that's our number one goal. So we have to be flexible. We have to be able to switch and mix and match and try different things and be experimental a little bit, because we need to find solutions. And sometimes when something doesn't work, we need to try something else. So basically, a socio-reality is, while there appears to be one single general natural reality in which all humankind and its environment is embedded, like capital T truth, within mankind in general, within single cultural regions and within single societies, groups appear to experience different cultural realities, resulting in cognitive differences in healthcare. These different cultural realities are formed by the different socioeconomic facts and socio-political ideologies, One could therefore speak of different socio-realities. Even in our modern time, this is ongoing. Like, we just had a pandemic, and half the people thought one way about it, and half the people thought a different way about it. And that's normal. That's just the way ideas work. Um, People see reality through a different lens, and it's good to be aware of that. It's good to understand that, and also to explore and investigate the variety of socio-realities that are available to us. And that requires that we don't get trapped in our socio-reality, uh, which would kind of be called, we don't want to get trapped in our orthodoxy of thinking. So an orthodoxy refers to the quality or state of being orthodox, meaning an adherence to established or traditional beliefs, practices, doctrines, particularly within a religious, political, or philosophical context. It can denote a widely accepted belief or theory which is generally considered an established fact. So, once upon a time, everybody thought that the earth was the center of the universe. And then Galileo was like, nah, it's not. And the church tried to attack him for challenging the orthodoxy of the time. It was the orthodox view that the earth was the center of the universe, and to challenge that was heresy. That's for everything. That could be applied to all sorts of things. Everything has an orthodox view depending on what socio-reality that we exist in as individuals. So there's different orthodoxies, and there's different socio-realities even in different countries in the world. Even within a single country in the world, there are different socio-realities. So I think the healthiest thing is to be aware of, where our orthodoxy lies as an individual. It takes self-reflection. It takes the ability to explore competing and alternative ideas, because we don't want to get stuck in the box, basically, because an orthodoxy is to be trapped in an orthodoxy is you're adhering only to what is customary, commonly accepted, customary, or traditional, and an orthodox practice, custom, or belief. And so social, political, religious, cultural, or philosophical norms are what constitutes an orthodoxy. So if you're inside of an orthodox view of reality, you're not thinking outside the box by definition. Okay? And I'm not saying I'm not saying that one way of thinking or one orthodox or system of thought is good or bad, because maybe the orthodoxy is right. Maybe the orthodoxy has better results in certain cases. So it's not really a judgment thing. It's just the awareness that that is the case. And so what happens when our thinking becomes calcified, like ossified, like a bone, or stagnant? Just like in our medicine, what happens when things get stuck and stagnant? So is it ever enforced by power? Obviously, yeah. Orthodoxy is often enforced by power. It could be political, economic, government forces. We are also practicing inside of as students, we're inside of an academic institution, which itself has an orthodox view of things. If a school is run by practicing Buddhists, their orthodox view of the world might come from a Buddhist perspective. If a school is run by Christians, that school's orthodoxy might come from a Christian perspective. But no matter what school you're in, there is an orthodox view. They're training you to pass tests which are created in adherence to an orthodox testing regimen. So TCM itself is an orthodoxy, and so that is just a reality. So it's good to understand that, because also there's other competing socio-realities, and there's other ideas that exist in our medicine in the pluralistic, space. And so we can think about that as kind of like dogma. Even a secular institution like an academic institution is not immune from dogma and orthodoxy. So we should always be questioning, what is the dominant socio-reality which constructs medical reality in our modern age, wherever we are? So speaking of dogma, Dogma is that which is held as an opinion, opinion, a tenet, or a doctrine. It's a formally stated and authoritatively settled doctrine. It's settled, right? Don't question it. A definite, established, and authoritative tenet. It's a doctrinal notion asserted without regard to evidence or truth. It's an arbitrary dictum. So it's like behavioral norms. We know the truth, capital T truth. This is the truth. This is reality. That's what dogma is. It's kind of like an authoritatively established reality of things. So any single individual deviating from these norms represents a threat to the social end desired by dogmatists. The comprehensive nature of most socio-political ideologies is apparent not only in the efforts of their propagators to reach each and every member of society, but also in their attempts to adapt all aspects of knowledge or science to their central perception of harmony and crisis. Any knowledge which, in its consequences, may contradict this central perception and the behavioral norms derived from it will be opposed and, if possible, eliminated. So, you got to think in a sense like, okay, like if you travel back in time to the Shang Dynasty and you try to tell people, hey, no, you're not sick because of your ancestors, you're sick because of bacteria and viruses, they might like run you out of town with pitchforks because you are challenging their dogma and their perceived reality. That's something that is very centrally held and could be seen as a threat to the political, economic, and socio reality of that time. And just in the same sense, if you are a person from the Shang Dynasty and you come to the modern times and you start telling people, oh, disease is not caused by bacteria and viruses, and you're telling this to all these people with, who have been trained in Western medicine, and you start telling them, actually, it's caused by, your ancestors creating a disease because of something that you did that went against what is correct, and it's caused by spirits and demons, they might look at you like you're crazy, and they might feel like you are challenging their socio-reality. So it goes both ways. But the reality is that in East Asian medicine, those actually are both ideas which coexist on a certain level in the pluralistic space. And so it's up to us as practitioners to kind of open our minds to the possibility of all of these competing socio-realities, which are not always in agreement with each other. And maybe at some point and at some time for certain situations, certain socio-realities and certain ways of approaching the medicine are the most effective ways. Now, I'm not saying that you should be treating people for ancestors or something, but I don't know. That's up to you. You're the practitioner, but to know that that is a possibility and that's also part of the medicine is important. And to be honest, these are still ideas which are still really influential and circulating in East Asian medicine today. So, what are the potential sources of dogma? Religions or philosophies. For example, Confucianism has its own dogma, Taoism has its own dogma, Buddhism, Christianity. Governments and state ideologies have their own dogma. For example, Marxism sees the world a certain way, capitalism sees the world a certain way. The ancient Chinese philosophy of legalism sees the world a certain way, and different socioeconomic theories see the world a different way. That's why they're competing with one another. Western science and scientific reductionism has its own socio-reality and its own sources of dogma, even no matter what they say. And a university has its own sources. Your family has its own sources. The culture that you grew up in and exist in, as well as teachers, individuals, as well as society. Any East Asian medicine school of thought has its own dogma. The school of yang supplementation has a much different dogmatic way of treating disease than the school of yin supplementation. The school of attack and purgation takes a totally different outlook on things than the school of nourishing the spleen and stomach. So they are totally opposed to one another. Is one right and is one wrong? I don't think it's necessarily so black and white. So the point is, anything which has access to a claim on the truth or onto reality is kind of like a source of dogma. And all we should really do is just be open-minded and kind of be skeptical and question it and think, hey, there are other options and other ways of approaching this problem, and maybe just be open to all the different options, know about them, and understand them, and then we can choose the best one for that particular moment. So that's why there are variations of medical reality. So the acceptance or rejection of concepts of disease by groups in society has rarely been independent of socioeconomic and sociopolitical determinants, be they consciously considered or not. Different systems of therapy not only deal differently with one and the same health problem, but that they, in addition, frequently recognize or emphasize quite different health problems in the first place. So basically what that means is that, the reality of medicine is downstream often of other things like politics, economics, religion, and philosophy. So even two individuals who are both practicing acupuncture, even if they're from the same graduate school, they will often reach completely different conclusions due to the influences, the schools of thought, and the socio-realities operating in their conceptual systems. So that is the soft coding that Paul Unschuld is talking about in our chapter. And so let's say that the basic validity of therapeutic concepts is, basically primarily social. It's a social thing in many cases. So the congruity between particular therapeutic doctrines and a particular socio-political ideology determines, in turn, the appeal of this therapeutic doctrine to individuals and groups. The actual therapeutic value of specific ideas, that is, their efficacy with respect to illness, seems to be of only secondary significance. The basic validity of therapeutic concepts is primarily social, which is kind of like a mind-blowing thing, because that's not how you think it is, but that's not how I intuitively thought it was when I got into medicine. But I think actually that's a true thing. That's actually true, in my opinion. So in other words, the changing of socio-realities over time determines and changes the therapeutic concepts. So what constitutes medicine changes depending on how society sees reality. So just think, if someone grows up in a society that believes spirits cause disease, they will treat disease by addressing the spirits. If they believe viruses cause disease, they will use antiviral substances to treat the viruses. If they believe disease is caused by an imbalance of qi, they will use methods that harmonize the qi. And that's why we have eclectic syncretism in East Asian medicine. It is a mutual penetration of different realities within one complex society in common, and can be observed, for instance, in the resort to different healthcare systems by a single individual. The eclectic and syncretic nature of patient and practitioner, utilization of available ideas and tangible primary resources in pluralistic healthcare settings of complex societies is partly a result of the healer's striving for secondary resources, that is remuneration. Sorry for that spelling error. It's secondary resources, that is remuneration. Remuneration. And of the patient's desire to maintain or regain health by all means. So, in other words, we have all of these eclectic, pluralistic ideas. They're intermingling. They're penetrating one another. It's an eclectic, mixed bag of realities in East Asian medicine. That's why there's so many different ways of treating something. And it's up to us as the practitioner, because our pragmatic, patient-centered perspective is we want to help this person by any means, to have access to all of these different ideas, to be able to utilize them, to understand them all and where they all fit in and when they're appropriate, and be able to use the best one that's suitable for that moment. So, in conclusion, we have these definitions: orthodoxy, socio-reality, dogma, paradigm, pluralism, syncretism. These will be important for our quiz. We need to understand that therapeutic systems are primarily downstream of socio-reality. We should be aware that East Asian medicine is, by its nature, pluralistic and syncretic. Pluralism and syncretism are important definitions to know for our quiz. We should understand and try to understand what Paul Unschuld is talking about when he's referring to the hard paradigm and soft coding of medical knowledge. And we should understand that syncretism is the blending of ideas. It's goal oriented. It's not dogma based. It's a practical and it's a pragmatic approach to healing. And so, this is just my opinion. We should strive to have more tools in our tool belt and learn how to use them all in a deep way, so that we have as many resources to draw from in our practice for the benefit of our patients. And that's what this course is all about. It's about investigating each of the tools. Where do they come from? Who created this? What was their socio-reality when they made this tool? How does it fit in on our tool belt, and when can we use it? What is it about? What's the philosophy behind it? What is it all about, basically? So in conclusion, that's our first lesson. That's our first lecture for the semester. And this is kind of just like we're setting the tone with just like, hey, this is how we want to approach all the other lessons. We're going to learn about all these different ideas, but we should just be able to kind of hold them all at the same time. Just have them all kind of like on a table in front of us and be able to pick and choose. And maybe it's not like, hey, this is the best one, this is the only one I'm going to work with. It's like, hey, maybe these all have value, and maybe these all can be useful and helpful. And maybe I can learn how to use all of these different tools in different ways. And throughout my career as an acupuncturist or an herbalist and a healer, I can use this course as a map to study in depthly any one of these systems of thought, socio-realities, and ways of healing that interests me and feels appropriate at the time. So thank you, everybody. Thanks for listening today, and I hope this is going to be a really helpful and valuable course. And put a lot of time into this course, and so I just want to say I'm sorry if there's like a lot of information in it. I don't mean to overwhelm anybody, and I just want to reassure everybody that the goal is to just learn the most that we can, and not to put pressure on you, academic pressure, or not to make you feel like this course is too hard or anything like that. So always feel free to communicate with me and talk to me. And the grading of the course is very straightforward. There's a quiz for each lecture. There's only a couple very short reflective essays, and then there's the discussion board. So if you're not taking the course, just enjoy the content. But if you're in the course, that is kind of how the grading is set up. Okay, so and the quizzes should be very straightforward. They're all based on these PowerPoint lectures and on our reading from the Paul Unschold book. There is almost none to a very small amount of information from the secondary resources in our Populi course. Those resources are almost all secondarily meant to add context and depth to the material of that lesson. In some rare cases, there's a few things, but for the most part, if you pay attention to the lectures and you diligently read your textbook and use those as resources during the quiz, you will be able to pass these quizzes, no problem. Okay, so I just wanted to throw that out there, but basically that's the end of our lecture. Thanks, everybody. I will see you for the next one.